Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, excellent, super. So yeah, as you just found out from Artyom, my background originally was in university level teaching, and so when I made the career switch a few years ago to try to apply those skills to the EFL world in Russia, I found myself kind of naturally drawn to those higher level students, and. That led me to not only be interested in teaching high-level adults, but also high-level teenagers, preteens, and young learners. So, to kind of set the stage for what I'll be talking about today, I want us to imagine what I've called the situation. And in this case, the situation is this lovely kid here. So you've got a young learner, 5 to 9 years old. He has an incredibly high level of oral fluency. In a case, and I've had a student like this, he actually lived in Britain for 6 years as a child, and then moved back to Moscow. And so his oral fluency was incredibly high. He was functionally a native speaker. However, being 5 or 6 years old, he hadn't developed what I would call literacy skills, right? So he hadn't really developed the ability to read and write in English. And so the challenge was, how can I keep this very high-level young learner interested, but also help him develop these kind of basic literacy skills that a typical 5 or 6 year old would need to go. And moreover, this individual, or this kind of imaginary situation we'll be working with, he's enrolled in Russian school, where the majority of his classmates are the more kind of typical student. And so it's our job as kind of a private school teacher to simulate and stimulate this young learner, and to help him become more well-rounded as an English speaker. So here's our situation. And I should say that even though I've set up this situation as a person who has lived abroad previously, that's not essential for all of the pieces of advice that I'll give you. That a lot of these things can also be applied to precocious, highly skilled learners in their own right. All right. So, what do we need? What does this student need? We need to take him from bilingualism to being biliterate, right? To give him those reading and writing skills, and particularly, we're going to need to maintain that vocabulary that he has obtained as a young learner, to prevent him from losing what those 5 years living in the UK gave him, and extend it for him in a way that's appropriate, meaningful, relevant, and long-lasting. And to complement all of that, we're going to need to develop their phonemic awareness. As a highly fluent young learner, he's perfectly capable and happy having a discussion, a talk with me, but you put some words in front of him, and it's just like an absolute foreign language to him. So how to make that transition from very functional, fluent communication to a well-rounded English user. So these are our goals, and this is also going to be the structure of my talk today. So, vocabulary development. As mentioned, we're going to maintain and we're going to expand. To maintain, the key there is finding out what the student's personal experiences are, right? Finding out what he knows, what he's capable of doing, and what his day-to-day experiences are like, and not letting him forget that. Expanding it, I've emphasized appropriacy here, because there can be a tendency to want to push these high-level young learners too far, too fast. And so you have to remember that when you're setting these vocabulary objectives, it has to maintain its appropriacy. That even though they're incredibly skilled, they're still young learners. So we have to keep that in mind. So I've used this word meaningful. Make vocabulary meaningful, 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 meaningful. How? One, put it in context. Stories, illustrations, cartoons, as much visual, audio support as you can possibly have. Don't attempt to simply expand their vocabulary with individual words. Support it, right? Give it a meaningful, rich context that the student will enjoy, will engage with, will retell to you, right? Taking advantage of the oral fluency that he has, and in so doing, will expand it. And relating it to their own lives. That one of the things we're trying to do with this type of student is give him the English side to his Russian education. And what do I mean here? Right? As I mentioned, this student is in Russian school, going through the normal kind of developmental benchmarks. Right? So, as an 8-year-old, he's kind of starting to learn more about the world around him. Right? Starting to become more aware of the elements, the geographical features he sees. Right? And so part of our task is taking that curriculum that he's getting in his other subjects and bringing them to life in English. So as that student is making those connections in his day-to-day school life, we are supplementing that and putting that into an English world for him. And the rule for adults, teens, preteens, and young learners: recycle and reinforce, right? Teach them the word at the end of the lesson, teach it to them again at the beginning of the next lesson, teach it again in the middle of the next lesson, do it one more time, and keep it going. Some activities to get them using, practicing, and learning vocabulary. Charades, of course. All right, a lot of fun, especially if you have a group of students. It gets them moving, gets them active. If you have the energy and like to move around, it's fun to have the student give you charades to do. All right, you can participate with them. Opposite memory, a nice challenge for high-level young learners. So the situation is you have cards with words that are antonyms, right? So it's a kind of more complex variation of more traditional memory where you have picture, word, right? In this variation, you'd have word, antonym. So it's a step up in difficulty. Category brainstorming. Getting them to write a list of words when in a certain category in a limited amount of time. In a group, you can make this competitive by giving them a time limit, and whoever comes up with the most words in the set amount of time can have some kind of reward, or just that nice warm feeling of victory. Back to the board. An activity that will take advantage of the oral fluency that they have. You write a word on the board, and the other students explain to them what that word is. And perhaps most significantly and most flexible, keep, maintain, and develop a vocab bag. All right. Every new lexical item that you come across, write it down, put it on a piece of paper, put it in a bag. It's amazing how fast this bag will grow. And this bag has a nice symbolic representation of all of the knowledge, all of the words that the student has acquired. And for you as teachers, it gives you the flexibility to immediately transition the lesson into a review activity. You can use these words to play Pictionary, to play Taboo, a kind of describing guessing game, charades as well, you could use with this vocabulary bag. It's a way to remind yourself as teachers of the importance of this constant recycling. Also here is a picture of a word journal. Highly encourage your young learners, your preteens, to keep and maintain a word journal where every new word that's encountered they write down. You make sure it's spelled correctly, and again, they're building this resource of words that A, serves as a resource that can be studied, and B, works as a motivational tool, because they go from day one, they see just a book of empty pages, and by the end, the book is filled with all of the new words they know, and it just provides that reinforcement mechanism that's so important for them. To phonemic awareness, right? The student can obviously say a lot of these words, but if you show them the word, can they actually pronounce what they're reading? Right? In a way, this phonemic awareness is actually a precondition for for some of the vocabulary expansion that depends on recognition of the written word. So some activities to do this. First, they need to be able to recognize individual sounds, right? To see a word such as bike and understand that there's a b, I, k, right? To be able to make those connections between the written letters and the actual sounds. This will help them pronounce words correctly, and as they develop their relationship with the language, they'll learn to recognize rhyme and alliteration. And it's with that rhyme and alliteration, we're going to use that as a shortcut to really help them expand their fluency. So, how do we do this? Going back to my individual that I had, who day one, I could use absolutely every one of these words. He would know what I'm talking about, but if I showed him P-I-G, no clue, right? So we started first developing knowledge of each individual sound, right? The in, right? Just those individual sounds. Then we moved to a version of bingo where I would simply say a word, sit, and the student would identify what word he's hearing. This can be varied by focusing on individual sounds, and by that I mean you instead of giving the student the whole word as a clue, you would give him just an individual sound. So like ooh, k, right? And they have to find a word on the board that matches those individual sounds. Another really useful exercise, as they've started to really develop this phonemic awareness, is finding the odd word out. Giving them sets of words, and they have to find the one that doesn't match. Because they won't be able to simply rely on pattern recognition, because they're all the same. But the pronunciation is different. And the individual that I had, and has been my experience in general, is that these 7 to 8 year olds really love these kind of riddles, challenges, puzzles, and it really kind of stimulates their curiosity. As they continue to develop more and more, you can use tongue twisters as a way to develop and expand their phonemic awareness. Right? So some of my favorites here. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Right? And a little bit silly. Admittedly, not the most demanding vocabulary. But here, remember, the point isn't vocabulary development. The point is understanding this is a ch, this is a w, right? Woodchuck. How much wood woulda? How much wood woulda? Right? It's developing those patterns, those ways that we link expressions, how we reduce consonants, all of those phonemic wonders of English, but in a fun and challenging context. I remember with this student, for about 10 minutes, we worked with just this one sentence, and I don't think he's ever had more fun trying to get this sentence out. There are literally hundreds of these tongue twisters, and it's a great way to get them excited about phonetics, which is delightful when that happens with a youngster. Another one that's also good for developing awareness of alliteration, right? Sally sells seashells by the seashore. A tough one even for me. And phonemic riddles. Also very effective and very useful for engaging with their curiosity. Right? You can start with a very basic one, like what word rhymes with pig and begins with b, obviously big, right? But as the student gets more and more comfortable, you can gradually increase the difficulty. That it's a more interesting and engaging way than simply showing them the word big and say, what's this word? Right? That phrasing it as a kind of riddle takes advantage of the oral fluency that they have and makes it phonemically valuable. Finally, as I'm sure you're all aware, young learners are restless and full of energy. Right? Use that to your advantage. Right? The variation of bingo that I showed you was basically me saying a word and them putting a token on the board. But really, there's nothing stopping you from putting those words all around the classroom, saying a word, and they run to find the word. It's great when you as the teacher need a nice break to stand in the middle of the room and you want the students to run around. So don't forget, movement should be incorporated in everything, and it helps keep them engaged and focused. A nice flashback to my childhood. Dr. Seuss, one of my favorite childhood authors, widely read in America, and when I was thinking about this individual and how I would get him interested, how I would keep his attention, I went back to my own childhood and thought about what I enjoyed as a 7-year-old. I was like, I should try Dr. Seuss with him. And I was like, well, maybe, but could that be too challenging for him? Let's see. So I tried it, and it worked brilliantly because the lexis in there is exactly what a high level young learner needs to expand their knowledge further. It has lots of rhymes, lots of humor, beautiful illustrations, and it was just a absolute treasure trove when I started using Dr. Seuss. I also used a lot of poetry. This is Boris the Spider. Right? He's clearly big and scary. And he's also fat and, what do you think?
Hairy.
Absolutely, fat and hairy. When I introduced my student to Boris, I scaffolded a bit. First, I would give the students options, right? I'd have like strong, funny, Harry, and maybe two other decoys, right? And so the first step was the student picks the right word that rhymes. The next step was take away the options, and the student does what you just did, come up with Harry. The third step, give them Boris the Spider, and let them write their own poetry. You can give them the words as the building blocks, but as they are capable, let them create their own rhymes. Again, they know the words, but seeing the spelling and incorporating those in a rhyming context will activate and solidify that phonemic awareness that is so crucial for them. So this is Boris. By the way, I should have written it here, but there's a great series of rhyming books that you are probably aware of, but it's by a publisher, Leapfrog. So there's a Leapfrog rhyming series, and they have probably over 100 of rhyming resources for these high level young learners. So search for Leapfrog rhyming, and you'll find it. Spelling, all right, the bane of many young learners in general, and high-level young learners as well. The classic hangman, which I decided to go with snowman, right? There's no reason you need to hang an imaginary stick figure. So instead, I modified it and I decided let's build a snowman. And if the snowman gets built, then the game is over. A classic, but a useful one for developing spelling. Giving them letter cubes, right? A table full of letters. You show them a picture, and they have to spell what's illustrated in the picture, right? So using those letter cubes to arrange it. Adapted board games. Children love rolling dice and moving tokens. So I made a board game that just consisted of pictures. And for every step, first he arranged the cubes to spell the illustration that he landed on, and then as we developed his ability to write, he would then have to write whatever space that he landed on. So you can adapt board games to develop their spelling abilities. And finally, categories. One that admittedly comes a little bit later, probably more appropriate for a 9 or 10-year-old. But you would give them a list of categories. For example, food, jobs, colors, animals, and so on. And then you give them a letter, and they have 1 minute to think of as many things in those categories that begin with that letter that you have given them. It's okay for a one-on-one. It's especially fun in groups of students because they can compete with each other and see which group, which individual can come up with the most words in each given category. And of course, only reward them if it's spelled correctly, to develop those spelling skills. And finally, to our third main objective, right? Remember, our three were maintaining and expanding vocabulary, developing phonemic awareness, and developing their reading and writing skills. Predictive reading is key, right? They have that oral fluency, so take advantage of that. Show them pictures of the story. Have them guess what the story will be about. Read first, if you have the ability in your classrooms and the arrangements, read aloud with the student so that the student can follow along with your voice as he's seeing the words. So at that early stage, you want the student beside you seeing the words as you read them. As they develop their independent reading skills, then you will have them read it and either retell it to the other students, or even better, act it out. Again, letting them use movement to make the learning more real. Obviously, reading is a wonderful tool to help build vocabulary. Journal writing, a way to make it relevant, and again, if you have the possibility, a way for you to engage with the student. You can have the students write in the journal, you take the journal, you write a comment back to the student takes it, responds to your comment, and you can start a kind of dialogue with the student. And one of my favorites to develop their writing skills is the blank comic strips. You can take any comic and on a copy machine just put a blank piece of paper over the dialogue, and the student gets to use their imagination and creativity to imagine what is happening. And again, you're taking advantage of that already high level of fluency and knowledge they have, but then they're having to take what they have up here and put it in written form. And it's also a good opportunity to build that vocabulary, right? If they have a specific idea that they want to express, or they want to know, like, what do you call these things? The bears have them and they're sharp, you know, they're claws, right? What does he look like? It's kind of like a werewolf, right? So all of these moments where the student sees something interesting in the picture, you can intervene as the teacher and give them that language to express it. Depending on the student's artistic ability, you can have them draw and illustrate these comic strips as well. At one point, my student and I got to the point where, actually, I should make a confession first. I'm the world's worst artist, and so it's a kind of constant point of humor when my students watch me try to draw something. And so one thing my student loved to do was write a short story and then watch me try to illustrate it. All right, and I would kind of act like I would act like it was more of a struggle than it actually was, because it was a way to kind of engage with him. So blank comic strips, a great way to go. And one final reminder here. High-level young learners are still young learners. They don't have the ability to think of grammar in an abstract way. They still need a high-paced lesson, frequent changes of activities. They have many of the same limitations about their conception, perception of the world, their ability to understand others' opinions that a non-high-level learner will have. So keep that in mind, and don't treat a high-level young learner like an advanced adult, because they're not. All right, so that's my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. Great presentation.